our first session is a fireside chat, and we're going to zoom in on the topic of how emerging and deep tech, especially around AI and big data, can help build a modern grid. And also, we want to look at what role the collaboration between startups and corporates is going to play in this field. I am thrilled that both guests for this fireside chat are here live with me today. So please welcome with me Marco Beicht, the CEO of PowerCloud, and Michael von Roeder, the CDO of the Elia Group. Welcome to the stage. Either one of our lovely reused chairs. It's great to have you both here today. I'd like to begin by giving you the floor to tell us a little bit more about your companies and what you do in relation to this topic. So if you'd like to begin, perhaps Marco would like to begin to tell us a little bit more about PowerCloud.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I'm Marco Beicht. I'm founder, chief executive officer of PowerCloud. And we are a software as a service company which provides a cloud for utilities. Well, when I founded a company, and this was in 2012, so quite long ago, renewables and all the energy transition was not so present than today. But we have seen that there's a massive change in utilities coming. A massive change because customer demand was changing quite fast. And this brought utilities in a situation where they had to be ready to adapt to new markets, new offers. And that was not so easy in the old systems. So we started to build a cloud platform. And the initial things we wanted to do is to make utilities fast, bring standards in the sector, and help them to grow new business. Over the time, then, well, there were a couple of political decisions that gave pace into the system. Renewables were getting bigger and bigger. And so utilities were able to use that pace and that flexibility we brought into the world of utilities and offer new things. That's what PowerCloud is about. And at the end, well, yes, we are a billing solution, but a billing solution is the core of a utility. And when you like to rise renewables, you have to add additional capabilities in your company to give your end customer as a utility a better price when he adapts to that situation when there's more energy in the grid or less energy in the grid. So that's what PowerCloud is about at the end.
Thank you very much for outlining that. Michael, would you like to go next and tell us a little bit more what the Elia Group does for building modern grids?
Thank you. Michael von Roeder, Chief Digital Officer and CEO of Elia Group. We indeed built the grid, the transmission grid, which is the backbone, basically, of our energy system. And connecting it to our topic, now we have to build a modern grid, because the current grid is not digitized as it should be. It's not flexible enough to deal with the increasing amount of renewables we see in our grid. Our German company is 50 Hertz, which drives the grid in Eastern Germany, and there we have the highest amount of renewables in Germany. Why? Because we have the Baltic Sea, we have lots of space, so there's lots of photovoltaic, and so that's our main job. And the other part of the job is to work with companies like PowerCloud to see how we can, ease the access of new entrants in that energy market and energy system. It's not only the market, it's also the physical system. Because traditionally, let's say, transmission system operators are less flexible, a bit slow maybe, and the reason for that is that we need to prevent risks to the stability of the grid, because if we screw up as a transmission system operator, everything else is also gone. So things like you can build a lot of PV, we try to phase out coal. That will only work if the grid is stable and flexible enough, and that's what we're working on.
Right. So I have a couple of questions that I'd like to ask about both of you, just to sort of outline the topic area of how deep tech, especially AI and data, are needed to create the smart grid. So maybe you can outline a little bit where we're at the moment as to how far these technologies are already coming into play, but also what you think we need in order to build the smart grid that we're missing today. Would you like to start?
So we do things with AI, obviously, prediction, volt control, these kind of things. But I would say we are just at the beginning of a big development. Reason I just mentioned, we cannot take the risk to put, just experiment in the production system with that stuff. Although I personally believe we will have to do more there, and we'll have to get faster, because I always say we have 9 years left until 2030, and the expectations from society, from governments, from the planet in the end, they rise day by day. Yeah, when you look at the new IPCC reports, oh, it's going faster than we thought. That is a huge challenge. And AI is needed for these kind of things. We heard before, stuff like digital twins. I believe if we digitize this whole thing, the whole energy system as a digital twin, then we will see the power of AI to its full extent. Mm-hmm. On the topic data, the TSOs get the smart meter data and all these kind of things. Here, the job is a different one. First of all, people who think that selling data is a good business model, they don't understand the topic data, I would say. You sell things on top of free data. As a TSO, we are a regulated monopoly, so I think it's our duty as a TSO to free the data we get.
I'm going to get to that in just a second, but I'm so glad you're already mentioning that now. Sorry, I didn't want to cut you off, though.
No,
okay, Marco. Then, yeah, Marco, would you like to comment a little bit where you think we're at today and what the future, hopefully, of the use of technologies such as AI and the smart grid will look like?
Sure. Let me start with data. And I think data is more used at the supplier side at the moment. So grids are a bit behind that, of course, because that's regulation. On the supplier side, a lot of utilities today use data, especially for things they do together with customers, like churn prediction, churn management, innovative pricings, stuff like that. However, we also see a lot of machine learning in the ecosystem all around doing decisions by machines, not by people, every day the same. So that's quite cool. But when it comes to data, well, we see that there's not enough data in the market at the moment. So there's no full smart meter rollout, obviously, and this is something we have to cover. When you look on PowerCloud, and let me make an example, there's Elia, that's the energy brand of Volkswagen, who brought a tariff on PowerCloud within 5 months from the start to the product launch, where they give the drivers of their cars basically a better tariff when they allow them, when the drivers allow VW to steer when they are charging their car and when not. So whenever they have a good profile, there's a lot of renewables in the grid, they send a small signal to the car, and then basically it charges up. But to do so, you need data. Mm-hmm. And this data is collected, for example, here through an app. Mm-hmm. So every driver has an app and can tell Volkswagen, well, I want to go 20 miles tomorrow or 100 miles tomorrow. And based on that and based on the availability of the renewable energy in the grid, they then can help the customer to shape the profile and so save money at the end. Well, it comes back to billing. So we can get a lot of efficiency if we have enough data, and I hope there's a really, really big data explosion the next days.
I want to pass it to you, but just bring in a word that you already use, which is standards, because I am a big believer in standards and interoperability, and I'm wondering if such kind of systems shouldn't be standardized so they work across brands and operators.
That's exactly what I wanted to say. So obviously we also work with Elia. What I don't think is a very smart move if we now start to building silos again. So right. Volkswagen does a Volkswagen balancing and Mercedes does a Mercedes balancing. That's where I see the role of the TSOs. So we should enable a system where this can be done, as you say, across brands. And it's not only about car batteries, although that will be a big thing, yeah, because you drive around a 70, 80 kV battery. When you look at a power wall in your house, that has maybe 10 kV. I believe we can get more benefit for everybody if that is balanced in an open system. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what we intend to do. On the variable pricing, because you're right, I mean, how do you change consumer and customer behavior? You give a price incentive, yeah, which we need because the supply will be dependent on things like weather. The demand we can control, yeah. So we need to balance that, and I believe, by the way, in real time. So a word about smart meters: 15 minutes, nice, but A, not rolled out, as Marco said, and B, should be real time. That's not real time. I come from an IT background and telecommunications background, so their real time is microseconds or milliseconds. Second remark, why is the smart meter rollout so slow? Because especially in Germany, we put super high hurdles. There are 3 certified smart meters. The certification took 10 years. Now it's super secure, Not so sure if that helps, because in Italy, for example, you don't have a smart meter gateway, and people need to keep in mind the European energy system is an interconnected system. It's a synchronous, balanced system. So if, and we can just watch that now in this new Blackout series. So somebody wants to understand that better, just watch it. It's exciting and it's interesting. And there you see the hack was in Italy. I believe we should have done that differently. That's too late now, so now we have to fix it in hindsight. What we could have done is simple measurement, dumb sensors in the edges in every household, and then do the smartness in the cloud. Now, as I said before, the energy industry, I'm new here, is very, very conservative for some good reasons. And the challenge is, to work with people like Marco and his company. So be innovative and be fast, but at the same time stay reliable, because it doesn't have to do super AI and super open data if the light goes off.
Yeah,
that's my challenge, basically. That's why I do digital and IT. So the stable part and the innovative part in one person. So I always have to fight with myself, basically.
Quite the stretch. So let's get back to the topic of data and also collaborating with the open sector, or like data for the public good. Because I'm a huge believer in open data. So I was a fan when you mentioned that immediately. And I'd also like to learn from you what those conversations look like, perhaps that you engage with utility operators, with other stakeholders that you're engaged with. Do you see that the public sector sort of understood the value and the necessity for data? I feel that, at least in this lovely city that I get to live in, there's a growing understanding, but there's not much yet in place to actually make things operable. Do you want to, Marco, do you want to go first?
Yeah, you're right. That's the problem. So there's a growing sense, of course. We see that data is getting more and more accessible, but it's really early stage. So basically, we as software providers have to find agreements with individual companies to access the data. I would really love to have that open data concept in place, because that would make us also in every utility so much more efficient. But I guess it will take a while until we are there.
How are we going to get there?
It will take a while, and that's something, and you saw it now in the German election campaign. Every single party who accepts climate change accepts that we have to speed up. Good news. And the whole permit things, that is one problem. Also, by the way, for extending the grid, which we have to do big time in Germany. But also on what Marcus said, it also takes a while, independent of that, with the regulation. Why? Because there's lobbies, there's lots of interests, and that's what at least our TSO, my TSO, will try to drive, that we get faster. Things like, for instance, we build stuff which are maybe not even like as a prototype, which are not fully covered by regulation, and just to show it how it could work, because it always helps in change that you show how the new world will look like. And I always say, seeing is believing. You can write a paper, that's good, but build it. So we currently do what we call internally a moonshot. Just one example. I want to be able to charge my EV in Brussels with my solar roof in Berlin. But not like just doing the commercial part, because that's possible today by certificates, etc. But really do it, and that's a huge challenge, both technically but also regulatory. Yeah, and this is there's many parties involved in the energy system, and I believe the TSO should play an enabling role and not a slowing down role. And if we are honest, I guess that's the reason why Elia asked me to join, because I come not from the energy sector. I come, as I said, from telecommunications. By the way, we do exactly what we did 15 years ago in telecommunications is happening here. One difference, the risk is higher. As I said, if we screw up, the light goes off. In telecommunications, I remember there were, the traditional phone lines, and then I was a young guy and said, there's this internet thing, and everybody said, you're nuts. The rest is history. There we could try it.
Yeah.
In the energy system, you can't just try things out at a real system. That's something where I believe, microgrids and local grids can help. I'm a big fan of local balancing. Also a debate, by the way, even in the TSO community, because, traditional corporates, when they're afraid of disruption, And that's, by the way, what is happening here and has to happen to make the energy transition. So it's a good disruption in a way. The natural reaction is to close down and try to prevent the disruption and slow it down at least. If we do that, we are not responsible, because we need to speed up, we said. So what Elia is trying to do as a group is embracing the disruption, and I go a step further, driving the disruption. And for that, we need to work with a community like startups, because they're the natural disruptors. And I don't want to, the next thing is you don't want to replace what they do, you want to enable it. We have a clear role for that. We get basically regulated money. So I believe that is our job, and your open data example is another example. Our job is to free the data, but as you can imagine, lots of debates, and the last resort is then always, but that is not possible because of GDPR. And that is something I think, well, you're not living in Germany, I guess, so...
Oh, I am.
You do, okay, then you know the discussion we had around COVID tracking.
Yeah.
Should we do this or not? And I think data protection is very important, but don't use it as a means to slow things down, because then you harm data protection itself.
Yeah, I'm always amazed how GDPR gets used as an argument when we're talking about infrastructure data and potentially not even personalized data.
But take an example from the healthcare sector. I have a friend who does AI in the healthcare sector, and he told me that even data about heartbeats, which you should collect to learn, is considered GDPR relevant data, even if you have no name to attach, because it's generated by a person. So the same goes for the smart meter data, is the argument, because I generate the data. And that's the problem, and that would get worse because smart metering is not sufficient, what you said before. I believe we need to get behind the meter, because what you want to meter are individual appliances like a heat pump, like an EV, like a fridge. Why? Who says that we should balance only based on region? Couldn't we also balance based on assets? Virtual balance zones. So these kind of things, for that you need to free the data and crack the nut of data protection in that way.
Right, and I think, let's say most people who have understood the conversation don't see these as two opposing themes. So obviously we want to respect data protection and keep that as something that's very important, especially on the personal data level. But at the same time, we need this data to create this energy transition. So there's this growing awareness of data for public good as well. And at the same time, this, the way I see it, or experience it again here in Berlin, we have these data silos that we were talking about earlier. We have infrastructure data that's often in the hand of corporates. We have startups trying to get in the game to collect data through their often innovative business models. And then we have the public sector that kind of doesn't really know often what kind of data they have or how to utilize it. So how do you see collaboration between startups, corporates, and the public sector necessary to connect these data silos or data discussions, Marco?
Well, that's key to success at the end. We wouldn't be here if not a corporate supported us in doing what we are doing. Basically, well, it's a hard decision, or it was a hard decision at the beginning to decide for PowerCloud, because we are exchanging the heart of a utility, the billing system, to something new, cloud. And cloud is a risk itself for many utilities, not these days, but 10 years ago. So it's super important for us that we get access to the corporates. And I see a lot of traction there in the moment. There are a lot of startups uprising. And we decided long ago that we put our platform under a commercial open source model, so that every one of our customers and partners can access the source code and understand what we are doing. And that's openness like data. Yeah. The good thing is everybody works on it. And we are so super fast in getting new things into the platform and new capabilities to utilities, what we couldn't do by our own. And if you do that, there's a growing ecosystem around you. So there are a lot of app partners who create apps on the PowerCloud platform, and that gives new startups the possibility to launch products that can be easily consumed by utilities, because those utilities are risk averse, as you said. And it's really hard for them to work with a startup, but when they use such an app on the PowerCloud platform, they have a trusted platform in the middle. They already have all the certifications and agreements that are necessary, and startups can't do that necessarily in the first weeks, months, or years. And so it helps everyone. And I guess that's a key to success for the whole sector, making things open, agreeing on standards, running on standards. Even if you look on the market communications part, this is so horrible from the view of a software vendor, because 20% of the effort goes to the happy path. That's when things are running good. But the data on all systems out there is terrific. It's really terrific. It's grown over decades. And this is something we are dealing with. And when we can do that all open, and when you open your data, that helps everyone, not only us, but every utility and every consumer.
I couldn't agree more. I would even go a step further. I believe that a TSO needs to change dramatically. And one of those changes is to understand the software landscape and not just buy some standard software. By the way, this energy software, I can say, is, due to historic reasons, pretty unflexible and pretty expensive. And it's closed source. So what we're going to do is we currently build our own system control software, and we will open source it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Why? Because in the end, we see the net tariffs. In the end, it's public money. Yeah, every citizen and every company has to pay it. So I believe if we build software with that, we should give it back. Plus, so that's more or less the moral thing. But it's also, as Marco said it completely right, you drive innovation and you create an ecosystem. So I believe the TSO should play a role in that software ecosystem as an enabler, putting some things there. We not build the whole systems, but we will build it in a way that you can plug in additional modules, so there's still business models for also closed source companies. If they decide they want to do a module for closed source, they could plug it in. There's lots of pushback on this out of the industry. Why? People are change resistant, especially in the energy sector. And then the arguments like, yeah, but if you open source it, it's not secure anymore. We have to deal with cybersecurity. Or is it resilient? And I will say, and I say it publicly, like here, I can promise one thing. It will be more secure and more resilient than the current system. Will it be 100% secure? Nobody can make that statement, but open source is driving security. But this is something this industry is not used to. When I was a young guy, I'm a member of the CCC, so I hacked SCADA systems. Yeah, that's what people do. Yeah. Now we build our own SCADA, and everybody is totally worried. If you see the big picture, a SCADA system is nothing else than a subset of an IoT platform. Mm-hmm. Look at Bosch, even corporate open source IoT platform. My previous company was a startup which digitized buildings, open IoT platform. So that's what we're going to do, and then everybody can contribute, use it also for microgrids, for instance. Yeah, that's a scalable system. And then together, with all the parties you mentioned, we have a chance to drive this in the right time. But there will be hurdles, and I can only ask again and again to all the startups out there and the universities, work with us. I'm trying to open us up, but make no mistake, I also have to transform the company itself. So there is, as I just mentioned, risk averseness, there's internal debates, people worry about their jobs in the end, yeah, talk back to AI, or if we automate, what do I do? But this is a problem of the whole society, I would say.
Yeah, well, what you think is absolutely right. We name it the Evergreen platform, and that's something you're building maybe too. Evergreen because you get innovation day by day. Back in the days, you bought a software system, you had some maintenance, but all innovation has to be built by yourself, or it comes once a year or twice a year in updates. You have to adapt to what you build it in your world. And that's really tough. And I know utilities that did not make updates, not in Germany, but outside of Germany, since 10, 15 years. So they work on the old stuff. On the Evergreen platform, the cool thing is, whenever there's something new, you can use it. And your company has the chance to be part of the innovation and drive the innovation forward. And once you deploy a new product, you will build another functionality maybe, add it to the Evergreen platform, and so everybody can take it. And well, that's the future from my point of view.
We mentioned cloud before, and I agree that was considered a risk in the corporate world and is not anymore. However, that's not true for the TSOs. Yeah, they still think that, and maybe 2 words on this. When I say cloud, I do not mean necessarily hyperscaler. So we need to split between how to work in the cloud and what does it mean. You can also have a cloud on-premise, like in your own data center. So this is much more about the way of working, agile working, serverless, and I don't want to get too technical, but it's a different mindset. And then in the next step, we can discuss what has to be at the hyperscalers or in some off-premise cloud. We will always keep stuff on premise simply because we are the only entity in the whole system which is blackout proof, because we have to rebuild the net in case of a blackout. So if other people say they have blackout proof data centers, then my first question is how long? Look the show. Then you see it, after 48 hours, the USVs go out because there's no diesel anymore, and you can't get new diesel because the lorry is also not driving in a blackout. Then the TSOs are the only ones left who have to rebuild the network. And for that, we will have decentralized, very small data centers which are blackout proof. But that's all cloud. And that's what people mix all the time.
Right. I have so many more topics I would like to cover with you. And it's been fascinating listening to both of you. I'm not sure we have time to dig into the decentralized systems and the power of those that we...
But it's super interesting.
Absolutely, and I would love to keep discussing this. So I hope we're going to have a future discussion on exactly this. Maybe a final question. It's fantastic that people like yourself are working in such corporations, and it's fantastic that people like yourself are building such startups. Startups, we know, are kind of the translators also, and the bridges. So I feel, though, we need more people like you and you in corporates, but also in the utilities companies. Like, there should be a translator like yourself hired by every utility company to do that job, to interface with. Maybe we can do a shout out, like, how do we bring more innovation back to corporates, back to public sector, to try to spread this message, to see these systems built sooner rather than later?
Well, at the end, it's, of course, the acceptance of some risk. This is something utilities have to learn and give new ideas and new startups a chance. That's super, super important. And then try it. Try it not in a really big project, but in a small one. And if it fails, you have to accept that it fails. Some projects will fail, other projects will not fail. But on average, I guess you make a good improvement if you do so.
Totally agree. When I started, that's not even 2 years ago, I thought, okay, that we need to train people, we need to explain them how all these things work, and then we just do it. Obviously, that doesn't work like this. I was too long in a startup to think that works, so I always switch back and forth. By the way, that helps a lot because you understand both sides. However, it doesn't have that only I understand it, because yes, I'm a member of the executive board of Elia Group, great, but I can decide whatever I want. If I don't touch the hearts and minds of my team and the other teams in the TSO, it won't work. So we have to show. As Marco said, we just try things, and that's what we do on a continuous basis. We have an entity in my area which is called the Nest, where we do prototypes, and some fail and some don't. However, let's keep in mind, if you are 40 years trained to prevent any risk, which is the right thing, I say again, this is not wrong. We just have to see what is right where. And I make always an example to SpaceX. I'm saying, they shoot humans in outer space, and that is a high risk. But still, they are agile. So what they do, they take their trial rocket, they launch it, it explodes, and they're like, oh, cool, we learned a lot. And this mindset is very different. Yeah, but if NASA does that, it's a big disaster. Yeah, why? Because they build one rocket, they put the humans on, and there's no option for failure. SpaceX builds 20 rockets, and the 20 is so reliable that you can put humans on. That's you have to switch that mindset. And there we need also, well, I don't want to say more people like us, because we need everyone. We need to get those two things together, and their startups can help with a mindset. And the best way to do this is to do joint projects, which we're doing.
Excellent. Thank you both so much for this super inspiring conversation and kicking our program off together with me today.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
We have a very short break, so we're going to have a short break for you actually between all the sessions, just to allow you to have a quick stretch or to grab a fresh drink. And so we'll be breaking for about 5 minutes now until we return with the next session, which is going to focus on impact investment.